Vicki.
Hey, Wynne.
I hear you're going to get some rain in Chicago.
I know. Oh my
Much needed.
gosh. Yes, it's like drought city around here. It's beautiful, like terrific autumn days, but
Hmm.
everything needs a good drink. So it might be short-lived, but yes, excited that there might be a little rain moving through.
Well, I have
Yeah.
something that's great to do on rainy days.
Ooh, ooh, do
Yeah.
tell. Ooh.
To freshen up your site design.
I love this topic. I love this topic.
It's one of those things that we never want to do, but is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's an easy thing to
Yeah.
kind of put in that bucket of seasonal shifts, kind of
Yeah.
sprucing things up,
Hmm.
tidying up. It's
Right.
like housekeeping.
Yeah. And,
Hmm.
I've had so many clients over the years that have done this in different ways. Like, at Microsoft, they used to like you'd have a product manager that would be in charge of, the launch of something.
Yeah.
And they'd have a perfectly fine site, but there would be a reorg and you'd get a new person. And then
Hmm.
all of a sudden they would throw out that old site and have to have a new one because
Yeah.
it reflected their personality.
Yeah.
And I learned early on in my career, you can have the best content in the world, but if
Hmm.
it looks
Yeah.
clunky,
Yeah.
it just doesn't fly. And it's the funniest thing about that visual appeal. You could also have a really beautifully designed site that has nothing there, but and people still like it. It's a
Yeah.
it's this weighing of
Yeah.
really having good content
Yeah.
and a design to go with it.
Yeah. And I think you can't separate the two.
Hmm.
And web designers know no matter what the content is intended to do, that what you say is so true. The content has to be
Hmm.
compelling, but the presentation of it and then the functionality, the navigation.
Hmm.
And then I think increasingly as we talk to our friends, who are blogging on WordPress, people are concerned about reliability.
Hmm.
And then, I'm old enough, to acknowledge this, years ago, the top management book was, Who Moved My Cheese? There are a lot of people that, myself included, that struggle with dashboard level changes, to
Hmm.
systems, and what does that mean downstream for some of our own sites?
Hmm.
But I think what you have to share with folks today, we love this because it's sort of a follow-up to the conversation we had about LinkedIn
Hmm.
recently about how do we present ourselves in a digital environment,
Hmm.
which really isn't much of a choice these days. It's just sort of,
Right.
pick your platform. But I think it's really important to consider all of the options and
Hmm.
the advantages, that we have when we pull back a little bit, and you're going to show us how to really break it down into steps so that we
Yeah.
can improve our content. Because in the end, we're trying to reach an audience. Most
Right.
of us aren't just doing this for ourselves. Some, might be in
Yeah.
a very, private blogging world, but we're trying to connect.
Yeah.
So I think everything that you have to share, for me, it's super empowering.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I will tell you, even after a career of doing this for 30 plus years, it isn't fun. Not, I mean, it's great if somebody's coming from an agency and they're going to show you glossy slides and they're going to do all of it for you and you don't have to,
Hmm.
that's part that can kind of feel fun, like where you get to just, you know,
Yeah.
pick your interior design.
Yeah.
When we're doing it for ourselves, it's
Hmm.
hard to sometimes dig into. So as you said, I have some specific steps and things to think about and
Hmm.
ways to approach it that make it a little bit easier just to
Yeah.
how to think about it. But it is necessary. We are on a WordPress platform in this case.
Hmm.
That presentation, and I'd say even if you are doing this just for a private blog for your family,
Hmm.
you got to make things findable.
Yeah.
You don't want to write things down that nobody is going to find. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, if you could, but most people call that a diary as opposed to a blog.
Well, and that was one of your first, observations for me when I came back to blogging about 2.5 years ago. I wasn't sure how much exposure I wanted.
Hmm.
And one of your observations for me was, girl, your content's not searchable. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, of course, our listeners and viewers should know Wynne is always very appropriate. She never said it that way. But I knew it was a flaw. But I will tell you, and I don't think I'm alone, I was afraid to touch this widget over here
Hmm.
because if I did something over here, this
Right.
little whoozy was going to go out of whack. And you
Yeah.
literally had to walk me through it
Right.
because I assume catastrophe, when I
Yeah.
touch stuff or that things will begin to like
Yeah.
be out of my control. And I
Right.
think what you have to offer is a reminder that there isn't much that can be broken in a catastrophic way, that there are
Right.
return paths,
Right.
to most things, which is really
Yeah.
liberating,
Yeah.
right?
Well, let's talk about widgets and woozies.
Okay, mom. Yeah. Okay, mom. Yeah.
I like how you put
Okay.
it. Widgets and woozies.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's a lot.
it is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, we've sort of talked about some of the principles that come with that site design, and doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter what platform it's, you know,
Right.
providing a clear mission statement or theme.
Mm-hmm.
People should know if they're in the right spot. That
Right.
helps a great deal. Um, when it comes to personal blogging, reflecting our personality is important, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just makes it more fun if people know that there's a person that
Mm-hmm.
is showing up here. And I'd say that's even true for sharing the heart of the matter, where it's a group of people. We still have a
Yeah.
personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then
And
this
try
is,
to brand accordingly,
yeah,
regardless of who's writing. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And this is to your search point, make your assets findable.
Yeah.
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 And create a homepage that changes without you having to work at it.
Yeah.
We call that a dynamic homepage, but putting on widgets and whoosies that update when you update, so that you're not having to change your homepage every time, but that
Yeah.
it's changing for you. So, if people see the same thing every time,
Yeah.
then perhaps a different landing page that is more dynamic is the right landing page for you.
Yeah.
And
And I love that because it's also trying to be consistent,
mhm,
but also thinking not about, what you're doing for yourself, but who the receiver is. So
mhm,
thinking about the intended audience as you're doing all of that. Yeah.
right. And then this goes to your seasonal comment. Give it some love every once in a while.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll say that I don't do that with my site very often, so I'll just fess up right now. But you're really interested in design, so how do these land for you?
I think it really helps to have some sort of like guidepost structure.
Hmm.
And for me, I think it's really important that personality comes through.
Hmm.
And whether that's in the, choice of the design overall or the visuals that people, select that are really important because that's one thing about, I think, good design, even though, we're writers, you don't want things to be so text heavy that you aren't giving some relief to the reader, in
Hmm.
terms of visuals that seem to be compelling or correspond. So I think, for every person, that's a little bit different. But certainly all of that spills over into writing good blog posts that aren't just
Hmm.
like blocks of text,
Right.
right? So it all translates. Yeah.
Yes, it does. It totally does. So as we think about changing the theme. In this
Hmm.
case, we're talking about WordPress themes, but most sites come with themes. What
Hmm.
are the considerations, the things that we see over and over again that are useful? Of course, you want that look and feel, but navigation. What is the menu system? Does it allow for submenus? Um,
Yeah.
Sidebars that go down to the right side. That's sort of a piece of content and piece of real estate that you can use, whether it's
Hmm.
subscribers or search. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then the subscription box. And then of course on the bottom of the page is the
Yeah.
footers.
And I think we have noticed that this is one category where, especially if you're new or you're trying to improve, your presence, it's okay to be a little bit of a voyeur about how
Mhm.
other people put, their sites together because you'll see things that maybe are missing or creative ways of using, some of those, foundational pieces, and then you can be inspired by it. It's not
Right?
a copycat thing, but it provides inspo.
Yeah, right. So, using this site Creative Core as an example, we can see the
Hmm.
menu goes across, the navigation goes right across here. In this particular theme, it doesn't allow for submenus, so there's nothing that pops down from here. The
Hmm.
sidebar is over here, and in this case, we colored it blue. But the search box was we put in the kind of header
Hmm.
area,
Hmm.
and then in the footer, we could make room for that legal stuff, the copyright stuff, more Facebook, Instagram,
Hmm.
Twitter kind of links. So all that is important real estate. And more than that, it is the stuff that changes when you change a theme. So I'm calling it out here,
Yeah.
not just for, where it is, but
Hmm.
as you put widgets in these areas, because you've
Widgets or
designed,
woozies?
gotta tell you, I don't know what a woozy is, but it sounds super fun. So let's keep using
Woo.
that word.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but in the WordPress content, widgets are the things that you put there.
Yeah.
And then if you change your theme so that you don't have these areas, that's one of the things that disappears. And that's one of the common questions and complaints that we
Yeah.
hear. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like my theme, but I've heard too many stories, horror stories, so I haven't changed it, or I lost
Hmm.
my content. That's a big one. Like I
Yeah.
had stuff. Where did it go?
Hmm.
Um, I can't edit the navigation in my new theme. That's usually because, you changed from a menu system with submenus to a plain menu system.
Yeah.
Um, or, and this is such a common one. I started hitting buttons and then I couldn't
Oopsie.
restore it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so human nature. I change one thing, I don't like it. I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. And then once you've changed that many things, you can't go
Yeah.
back. So we're going to talk about
Yeah.
these in all in this, as I flip
Yeah.
through here. But those are the things that we hear a lot of.
I love it because this is, a true to life story, about kind of being cautionary as you're shopping themes and looking at different options, but also remembering when you're making changes, to your fourth point there, the bullet about hitting buttons and, then trying to find your way back. You need to do yourself a solid and make sure you've got enough of a breadcrumb
Mm-hmm.
trail about what you did so that
Right.
if you need to double back, you can. But I think there is, I don't think I'm overstating this. There's a certain element of anxiety that some of
Mm-hmm.
us who are non-technical have. When something doesn't work, we immediately think, I broke it. I must
Right.
fix it. I
Right.
must do this quickly. And it plays into all of that. All of a sudden, you're hitting everything and you've made something small major.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I would say even amongst my team of very experienced technical people,
Hmm.
often what happens, you get tired, um,
Yeah.
but so you think you fixed something, you think you've broken something, you think you know what it is.
Hmm.
There's a certain amount of supposition that goes in, and so
Yeah.
that you go down a trail instead of the thing that I found to be foundational, and I've taught this
Hmm.
in every troubleshooting class that I've taught for 30 years, is you change one thing, you write it down.
Hmm.
If it isn't what you want, you change it, or if it doesn't fix the problem, you change it back. And
Yeah.
then you are starting from this point. You
Yeah.
go here, you go back. You go
Yeah.
there, you go back. You don't try to go, you're not in the outskirts of no man's land where you
Yeah.
make one change to another change and then you don't know. You've lost
Yeah.
your breadcrumb trail, as you put so
Yeah.
well.
But I love that about you because, for our listeners or viewers who don't know, Wynn's background is in electrical engineering, and yet she has this, beautiful creative side. You are probably more than anyone else in my life. You have the capacity to be both linear in your thinking, but also kind of global and
Mm.
creative and very open-ended about things. But where this is concerned, linear thinking is your friend. One thing, write it down, right?
Yeah,
Go to the
yeah,
next line, but
yeah,
don't be twisting and like
right.
going in circles. No.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and thank you for that compliment. But I've seen it
Welcome.
happen, even amongst the most linear people, they get tired and they're
Yeah.
trying to find the shortest route
Yeah.
to the to where they think that they're going to be done with this problem.
Yeah.
Tired, frustrated, angry, any one of those emotions, and
Yeah.
they'll forget the process. So
Yeah.
that's it, it is important. So
Yeah. I hear
um
you.
navigation. Do you need the ability to have some sub menus? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
showing a sub menu here. This happens to be from my site where you can pop down that. Not There aren't a lot of themes on WordPress that I've found, and I didn't. There's hundreds of themes, but I haven't looked through them all that
Mm-hmm.
have this. Vicki, when we changed your site, you had some menus, and then we
Mm-hmm.
changed it to a theme that didn't have some menus, and I was
Yeah.
frustrating
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't necessarily clear that that didn't have any submenus before we started.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it speaks to your point though about sort of as aware as you can be, but then
Mhm,
when you make that shift and you apply a new theme before you go hog wild doing a bunch of other stuff, assess,
mhm,
kind of the best fit and is it behaving the way you thought it would so that you can discover those things and then make a decision.
mhm.
It in that moment, what's more important,
Right. That's a
right?
really good way to put it. Make sure that this is lining up with what you value and
Yeah.
in your design. So we have the theme gallery. That if you go into your site navigation and you go under appearance, it shows up there. You
Mm-hmm.
can see what theme that you're currently using, and it's a really good thing to note before you start. You can see the name of it. You can see what's active. It's right there in the top left. Know
Yeah.
what it is because they can be hard to find, especially when you get frustrated.
Well, and a lot of them have like very funky, unique names. It's not like
Hmm.
theme A, theme
Right,
B, theme,
right.
yeah.
Or
Mm-hmm.
words like I think mine is Revelar and yours is Bitacora.
Yep.
So that it is good to note that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the If you click on a theme, you won't necessarily, it's not going to just pop right onto your site. You get a
Mm-hmm.
chance to read about it more,
Mm-hmm.
and there's usually an ability to preview it right here up in the corner before you go. They don't always say these things like this, that this will give you a menu or a sub menu or sidebar. It's almost by observation that you have to notice these. In my experience with WordPress, there might be a more
Yeah.
um
Well, and when I know some people are afraid to click that, to take that
mhm,
next step and click into preview because I think there's still some concern about whether or not it's previewing and pulling content from a, live site versus
mhm,
previewing with kind of filler content that was
right.
there. And people are nervous about having the pull from their existing content. How do you assure people about that?
Well, I think if at some point you have to trust the process.
Yeah.
And it doesn't go live until you say make this active.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a button that says preview, and there's a button that says activate this. And activate this activates it.
Yeah.
Preview previews it. So that is probably the distinction that helps a great deal there.
Yeah.
So if you hit the preview mode, you will see some combination. In this case, you see the navigation came through on the preview,
Mm-hmm.
but the design part of it is really the design that was with the theme. If you saw it
Mm-hmm.
in the info mode, it was working. It was an architectural thing, and this wasn't having anything to do with that. So you get
Right.
to see a little bit. It's not going to be everything. The title, the logo, the
Mm-hmm.
the menus. It's not everything.
But it's
Um,
good that you're calling that out because some of it is seeded content just to demonstrate what the capacity is. And
right.
that, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's when you'll see it. Is there a sidebar there? Okay, no. So,
Yeah.
like in this case, I'm going to go look at your theme that's on
Mm-hmm.
Victoria Ponders. And it calls it out as an old school theme for a sidebar revival. So that's, it really called it out. This has a
Yeah.
sidebar. Doesn't have sub
Mm-hmm.
menus, and it doesn't say that. Oftentimes,
Yeah.
they're trying to sell their themes as much as they are um, um, to give you the information. So,
Yeah.
um, there's a sidebar in this. And again, that's a really good space if you're going to have, you know,
Hmm.
call outs to your books or other things that you have going on. You could put your workshops there. There's a lot of stuff that you could do with a sidebar.
Yep. And I think
Uh,
you've helped me see that as a space that can be a little bit more stable or evergreen, that those are
mhm.
things that may not need to change very often, but are, yeah.
Right. We see people a lot put like tag clouds there that show, what are
Hmm.
the things that people can click through to get a particular topic or
Hmm.
tag. Or people will put a calendar there of when, could you jump back to something that you saw in May of 2023.
Yeah.
It'll show you that.
Hmm.
So, this is the preview of the Bitacora design.
Hmm.
We can see the menu then goes up here, and here's the logo, and it picks up the tagline.
Yeah.
Um, so here's an interesting one, another one that I tried in the preview mode. It pulls in it pulled in the navigation, but you can see it adds in the LinkedIn and the Twitter, and it pulled the bot stuff up from the footer, and it made it all kind of munched up. So that's where
Hmm.
we can start to say, okay, I think I'm going to have, if I chose this, I'm going
Hmm.
to have some cleanup.
Yeah.
All doable, but it's whether you want to do it or not. Because it
Yeah.
it pulled in some things that weren't on just the top level navigation.
And when do you think that, so, when I've done this with you, one of the things that's sort of um, mm, it's in a checklist that runs in my mind. A lot of us will have a visual reaction to whether or not we like this display and kind of the acreage that
Hmm.
is there.
Hmm.
It's bold. There's a lot of color that can be applied in the header. There's an opportunity for a large image. So I think,
Hmm.
do you think it's also true that people kind of react about the visual
Oh,
representation?
yeah.
But your point is well taken. You've also got to look at what the trade-off is for that because you might like that, but where are some other things, maybe align differently?
Yeah, right. And, as you said, I'm an engineer. I've done a lot of site design using really good graphic designers for lots of years. So I know enough, but I look at this from an engineering perspective of what
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to fix. And
Yeah.
if it's a fresh site, then you're not going to worry about that so much. But it makes me suspect that there is no footer in this theme.
Mm-hmm.
If it pulled the stuff that I had in the footer into here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would
But
be your
yes,
clue.
if
Mm-hmm.
the visuals are what you want, and that goes back to the look and feel and making this about, a representation of you, then
Mhm.
yeah, go by all means. Go
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
Um,
But you have to take it as is. It might be a trade-off, but you have
right.
to think about the functionality because you want people to be able to move around and get to your content.
That's right.
Yeah.
So some themes, like I'm looking at my Revelar theme, it did not do a preview of the content that was on the site. It just said,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to demo this site? So you could just see what the demo site looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a site that we're not concerned with right at this point. So I just activated the design so you could see what happened. I activated that design, which is the design that I have for my Surprise by Joy site. I
Mm-hmm.
activated it on this one. Um, and I just wanted to make the point. I lost the navigation, the
Yeah.
footer, the search, the subscribe content. If you
Yeah.
like those, they're totally rebuildable.
Yeah.
But by changing what parts were available in a theme,
Mm-hmm.
and this is why people say, I lost something. Well, yeah, you did because this thing had a different navigation and it had a sidebar and it had a footer in your old site. We activated a design that didn't pull from those same widgets. And
Yeah.
so it looks like I've lost everything.
Yeah. When truth is, it just didn't have a place to put it. The
Right.
content's still there. It just couldn't find a home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I reverted, and this is where knowing that what your theme name was previous is really helpful.
breadcrumbs.
Right. Tenku,
Mm-hmm.
I think was the thing. So I went back to it and
Mm-hmm.
here's all my content back again. I
Yeah.
didn't lose the content.
Yeah.
The caveat is if I go through too many themes, if I went from Revlar to Bittercorda to 2024 and then back
Yeah.
to Tenku, there's no saying what's going to happen to all that content in all those widgets when I go
Yeah.
full circle. So that's where I want to go Revlar. And then I want to go
Mm-hmm.
back to Tencore. I didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go back. You can, all I did was I went to the theme, I chose Revlar, I activated the design,
Mm-hmm.
didn't like it. I went to the theme, I went back to Tenku, activated that design, and it came back.
Yeah.
So that's
And
the
I
one change
think
at a time.
Yeah, and I love that. I think, as we've listened to some of our, writer friends struggle with making these decisions, it seems like people are interested in making updates
Mm-hmm.
because they're inspired, to do something
Right.
creative or to do a refresh. But I think everything that you're reminding us of is that you have to think of it as like construction and building blocks
Mm-hmm.
first. On
Mm-hmm.
the other side of moving your content into a new house, you can do a lot of that, like the decorating and the
Yep.
sprucing, but you have to make sure that you built a foundation that's going to work for you. When you try to do the creative stuff, but also just make sure you've moved in appropriately,
Yeah.
it might be accomplishing two different missions at the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I get frustrated and often overwhelmed. I will
Yeah.
sit down and I will pout. I will just
Yeah.
pout about it,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
We could talk endlessly about other things you can do, like adding your own custom style sheet, tagging once you've gotten
Hmm.
there,
Yeah.
tricks like that. If people are interested, I'd be happy to talk about those. That's a little more in depth, but you're right. They are two different things. I love the way that you put it. You're building a new house, and then you have to, you know, get everything to fit. Um,
Yeah.
the
But if you're like me, I don't want to care about like the roof and the gutters, right?
Yeah,
I'm more
yeah,
interested in like let's talk about tile. Let's talk about like the
right.
paint
Oh,
color and
right.
all
And
that.
that's going to look
But
so
you
good
can't.
when we pull it all together. It
Yeah.
is. But
Hmm.
you're going to have to, rearrange some things.
Yeah. Wow. So helpful. And I think, people that want, some inspiration about how to break this down will find this super useful because the part that I need is the encouragement
Mm-hmm.
to try, and not worry. And I think you've given us several examples of it. It is doable, but also just be mindful of what you're doing in each
Mm-hmm.
step.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I would say maybe one of the most important things you said is really shop the themes because that's something
Mm-hmm.
else where WordPress does seem to push out,
Right.
new options, and you really need to, kind of buyer beware. What are you
Yeah.
offering?
And the way that I think about that, not only individuals, but in the different parts of that of elements,
Mm-hmm.
is your theme is hold something. Like
Mm-hmm.
the sidebar might either hold text, it could hold that search button, it could hold
Yeah.
the subscribe button. If you
Mm-hmm.
get rid of the container, those widgets are not going to appear magically
Yeah.
somewhere else. You can
Right.
put them back on, you can rebuild them.
Yeah.
Um, that's the part that I think gets people frustrated.
Yeah.
I picked something, for instance, and not to get into too deep, but in the Tenku design for Creative Core that we were looking at, they have three different footers, and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to figure out which footer goes where and where to put the content to get there. Took me a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. If I chose one with
Mm-hmm.
just one footer, who knows what's going to show up on that footer?
Yeah. Right. You may
So
have lost control.
I've
Mm-hmm.
I've lost what was in the basket because I have a new thing that doesn't have that same basket.
Yeah.
So it's just being mindful. And again,
Mm-hmm.
you can preview, you can activate, you can go back, but
Yeah.
just do one thing at a time.
Yeah. Wow. That's maybe beyond the message for today. That's a good life lesson, right? One
That's
thing at
true.
a time, do it
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
right?
Know what your baskets are
Yes,
and what you're
exactly,
holding in
right?
them. Hmm.
Yeah, and all of that I think plays well to, the time and effort people put into creating their blog content,
Right?
right? To follow a lot of those same principles, to
Yeah.
make things readable and purposeful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
we see this all the time because we go to people's sites because
Mm-hmm.
we want the podcast with them. And then we're like, how am I going to find that
Yeah.
one piece that I'm thinking of that I want to ask, put a podcast prompt in?
Yeah.
People doesn't have the search bar.
Oh, great
Then
point.
you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to try to then guess when I read it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, "Oh, do I know the month?" And then I'm gonna have to see that there's 4. Let's say somebody has that part. It's like, okay, I can see that there are 4 posts. I'm gonna have to thumb through all that. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I know is that this happens a little bit generationally too. Older, our generation and older tend to use navigation,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the younger generations that grew up with Google, they search. They don't even
Oh,
bother with it. There is a little
yeah.
bit of a divide there. Um,
Yeah.
there's some
Oh,
crossover, but you'll find that you need to provide both for
interesting.
different
Is
mindsets.
it about the wayfinding, those of us who once upon a time understood what it was like to read a Rand McNally map, right?
Yeah,
And that we needed to kind of do it that way versus
yeah,
I'm just going to go and fetch it, right?
yeah,
Because that's, yeah, I hadn't
yeah.
thought about that. Yeah,
It happens all the time in
yeah.
company site design.
But
It's
I think what you said also, there, plenty of bloggers, and it's a conversation for another day, people that want their content to be searchable.
hmm
And I think there are tons of practical principles related to what you've shared about site design
yeah,
and then content development. You want what you're doing to have
right.
some impact. I think for the most part is something that
hmm
most bloggers and writers feel, but you have to be a little bit thoughtful and conform a little bit to
hmm
standards that make it easier to go and get. Like,
Yeah.
what is it that Wynne has done? And the basic thing, like having the ability to search,
hmm
is one, but then there's that whole category of SEO that people
Right.
struggle with, right?
Oh my gosh, there's so many other related topics. Again, we could
Yeah.
talk about them if people are interested. SEO, Google Analytics, understanding
Yeah.
if your pages are being indexed. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Not like we figured it all out, but they're the
no,
things we think about.
they're the
Hmm.
things that help if you do want to be findable
Hmm.
um, and and network with others because that's
Yeah.
the point. It isn't that we're saying that everything is going to be a viral hit. This is about connecting to other people based on mission. And this ties back to what you said
Yeah.
about LinkedIn tags.
Hmm.
Do What are the topics we're interested in? And do we want to have those conversations with other people? And
Yeah.
this is just that basic work of
Hmm.
um, being
Yeah.
findable.
Yeah. And we love that. And that's how we find,
Yeah,
wonderful friends, to
right.
podcast and chat with. And yeah,
hmm
yeah, it all relates.
It all
Hmm.
relates. So
Yeah.
thanks for going on this little site design mission.
Thanks for taking us on a tour. I made lots of notes, even though I get to be, in your aura often. There's always something new that I learn. So thank you for taking the time and all the rich examples too. Really
Oh,
good stuff.
good. Thank you.
Mwah.
Mm,
Bye.
back at you.